What if I told you that 10 ounces of silver sitting in your drawer right now could be worth more than your entire stock portfolio in the next crisis? Sounds crazy, right? But here's what most people don't understand about silver and why the smartest money in the world is quietly accumulating it while everyone else is distracted. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now in the silver market, because this isn't just about price charts and technical analysis. This is about a fundamental shift in how wealth is being protected, and most people are completely missing it. Silver has always been the poor man's gold, the overlooked little brother that never gets the respect it deserves. But something extraordinary is happening beneath the surface. While gold has been making headlines with its meteoric rise, silver has been quietly setting up for what could be the most explosive move in precious metals history. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing that should have every American paying attention. The ratio between gold and silver prices is telling us a story that most people aren't reading correctly. Think about this for a moment. Throughout most of human history, the gold to silver ratio hovered around 15 to 1. That means 15 ounces of silver would buy you 1 ounce of gold. It made sense because that's roughly how the metals occur in nature. But right now, we're looking at a ratio that's been as high as 80 to 1, and even with recent movements, it's still dramatically elevated from historical norms. What does that tell you? It tells you that silver is historically undervalued compared to gold, and when these ratios correct, they don't do it slowly. They snap back violently. But let's talk about why 10 ounces specifically, because this isn't just some arbitrary number I pulled out of thin air. 10 ounces of silver represents something profound. It's accessible. It's tangible. It's an amount that almost anyone can acquire without breaking the bank. And yet, those 10 ounces could represent the difference between financial security and financial devastation when the next crisis hits. Here's what most financial advisors won't tell you, because frankly, they don't understand it themselves. Silver isn't just a precious metal. It's not just jewelry and coins. Silver is the most industrially critical metal on the planet. Every smartphone in your pocket contains silver. Every solar panel being installed to meet green energy mandates contains silver. Every electric vehicle rolling off the assembly line contains significantly more silver than a traditional car. The military uses silver in virtually every advanced weapons system. Medical equipment relies on silver's antibacterial properties. The list goes on and on. Now, here's where it gets interesting. While demand for silver is exploding across every industrial sector you can imagine, supply is actually declining. The major silver mines around the world are getting older, ore grades are declining, and new discoveries aren't keeping pace with depletion. Most silver today comes as a byproduct of mining other metals like copper, lead, and zinc. So when those mining operations slow down, silver supply gets squeezed even harder. Let me give you some context that should make your hair stand on end. The total amount of above-ground silver available for investment is estimated to be less than 2 billion ounces. Sounds like a lot, right? But divide that by the 8 billion people on this planet, and you're looking at less than a quarter ounce per person. Now consider that central banks hold over 35,000 tons of gold in their reserves, but they hold virtually no silver. Why? Because silver has been demonetized, pushed out of the monetary system, treated as just another industrial commodity. But here's the beautiful irony. That demonetization, that dismissal of silver as just an industrial metal, has created the opportunity of a lifetime. Because when people wake up to what's happening, when they realize that the dollar is losing purchasing power at an accelerating rate, when they understand that their retirement accounts are denominated in a currency that's being systematically devalued, they're going to rush toward real assets. And silver, with its tiny market size compared to gold, is going to experience price moves that will make gold's performance look tame by comparison. Before we go further, I want to share something with you. I've put together a free guide that shows the saving secrets thousands of American retirees are using to protect their hard-earned wealth. It's in the description below. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about understanding what's really happening to your purchasing power and what you can do about it. Check it out when you get a chance. Now, let's talk about what 10 ounces of silver really represents as an insurance policy. Insurance is something you hope you never need, but you're grateful to have when disaster strikes. Most people insure their homes, their cars, their lives. But how many people insure their purchasing power? How many people have a hedge against the systematic destruction of currency value that's been happening for decades? Your 10 ounces of silver is insurance against inflation, not the official inflation numbers the government publishes, which conveniently exclude food and energy, the two things you actually need to survive. I'm talking about real inflation, the kind you feel every time you go to the grocery store, every time you fill up your gas tank, every time you pay your utility bills. Silver has been money for 5,000 years. It's been a store of value longer than any government, any currency, any empire has existed. When paper currencies collapse, and they always do eventually, silver remains valuable. But it's more than just inflation insurance. Your 10 ounces of silver is insurance against financial system instability. We live in a world where banks are more leveraged than they were before the financial crisis, where derivatives markets have grown to sizes that dwarf the entire global economy, where a handful of institutions control the flow of money and credit to a degree that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. When confidence in that system cracks, when people start questioning whether their digital account balances are really safe, physical assets become priceless. Think back to what happened when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Think about the panic, the bank runs, the desperate measures taken to prevent contagion. Now imagine that happening on a larger scale. Imagine a scenario where multiple banks are in trouble simultaneously, where the government's ability to bail everyone out is questioned, where people start pulling their money out of the system en masse. In that environment, having physical silver, something you can hold in your hand, something that doesn't depend on any institution's solvency, becomes incredibly valuable. Your 10 ounces is also insurance against geopolitical chaos. We're living through a period of unprecedented global tension. The dollar's role as the world's reserve currency is being actively challenged. Countries are settling trade in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. The BRICS nations are working on alternative payment systems. Central banks around the world are repatriating their gold, bringing it home from storage in places like New York and London. Why? Because they understand that in a multipolar world, in a world where alliances are shifting and the old order is breaking down, you want your wealth in forms that can't be frozen, can't be sanctioned, can't be controlled by any single government. Silver plays a unique role in this new world order. It's too cheap for central banks to accumulate in meaningful quantities, which means it's flying under the radar. But for individuals, for families trying to protect their wealth, silver offers something gold can't: affordability combined with massive upside potential. You can accumulate a meaningful position in silver without needing tens of thousands of dollars. Those 10 ounces might cost you less than $1,000 today, but their value in a crisis could be multiples of that. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this point. In Venezuela, as their currency collapsed and hyperinflation took hold, people who had even small amounts of gold and silver were able to survive while their neighbors starved. A single silver coin could buy a week's worth of food. A small gold piece could get you out of the country. The people who had trusted their savings to the banking system, who had believed the government's promises that everything would be fine, they lost everything. Their life savings became worthless overnight. But those who had converted even a small portion of their wealth into precious metals, they had options. Now, I'm not saying America is Venezuela, but I am saying that the same forces that destroyed Venezuela's currency are present here, just moving more slowly. Money printing on an unprecedented scale, deficit spending that can never be repaid, a political system that's incentivized to promise more benefits than can possibly be funded. These are not sustainable trends. They end badly. The only question is, when, not if. And here's something that should terrify anyone paying attention. The silver market is tiny. The entire annual silver production is worth less than what some tech companies spend on stock buybacks in a single quarter. The total value of all the investment silver in the world is a rounding error compared to the bond market, the stock market, even the real estate market. What happens when just a small percentage of the money in those markets decides it wants exposure to silver? What happens when pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, or even just affluent individuals decide they need precious metals as part of their portfolio? The answer is that silver's price could move in ways that seem impossible to people who think in terms of normal market dynamics. We're not talking about a stock that can issue more shares. We're not talking about a bond that can be printed into existence. We're talking about a physical commodity that takes years to bring new supply online, in a market that's already running deficits between supply and demand. The industrial demand alone is staggering. The solar industry is projected to consume massive amounts of silver over the next decade as countries race to meet climate goals. Electric vehicles use significantly more silver than traditional cars, and EV adoption is accelerating. 5G infrastructure requires silver. The Internet of Things, with billions of connected devices, all need silver. And here's the kicker. Most of this industrial silver is consumed, not recycled. It's used in such small quantities in each application that it's not economically viable to recover it. So unlike gold, where almost every ounce ever mined still exists in some form, silver is being permanently removed from the available supply. Now layer on top of that industrial demand the investment demand that's starting to build. Silver ETFs have been seeing inflows. Mints around the world are reporting record sales of silver coins and bars. Premiums on physical silver, the amount you pay above the spot price to actually get your hands on the metal, have been elevated for months. That's telling you something important. There's a disconnect between the paper price of silver traded on exchanges and the real-world price of physical metal. That disconnect doesn't last forever. Eventually, the paper price has to catch up to physical reality. Let me share something else that's happening behind the scenes. The big banks, the ones that have been accused of manipulating the silver market for years, they're changing their positions. The concentrated short positions that used to dominate the market are being reduced. Why would banks that have profited from keeping silver prices suppressed suddenly change their strategy? Maybe because they see what's coming. Maybe because they understand that fighting a market that's fundamentally in deficit is a losing battle. Or maybe because the regulatory environment is changing and they can't get away with the same tactics anymore. Whatever the reason, the setup in silver right now is unlike anything we've seen in decades. You have declining supply, exploding demand, a historically low ratio to gold, and a market so small that even modest capital inflows can move the price dramatically. And you have a macro environment where faith in fiat currencies is eroding, where inflation is proving to be far more persistent than central banks claimed, where geopolitical tensions are rising, and where the financial system is more fragile than most people realize. Your 10 ounces of silver is your stake in this opportunity. It's your insurance policy against all of these risks. But it's also potentially much more than that. It's an asymmetric bet, a situation where your downside is limited, but your upside is enormous. Silver has intrinsic value. It's useful. It's been money for millennia. Even in a worst-case scenario where none of the bullish catalysts play out, your silver still has value. But if even a fraction of what I'm describing comes to pass, those 10 ounces could be worth multiples of what you paid. Think about it this way. If you buy 10 ounces of silver and the price goes to zero, which is impossible because of industrial demand, but let's say it somehow happened, you'd lose whatever you paid. Maybe a few $100s. But if silver returns to its historical ratio with gold, if it even partially catches up to where it should be based on supply and demand fundamentals, those 10 ounces could be worth several times what you paid. That's the definition of asymmetric risk-reward. And here's something most people don't consider. In a real crisis, in a scenario where the financial system is in trouble or currency is losing value rapidly, the price of silver in dollar terms becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is what that silver can buy. What matters is that you have a form of wealth that's recognized globally, that can be traded for goods and services, that holds its value when paper assets are collapsing. I want to take a moment here to talk about something important for those of you who are thinking about your retirement. If you're sitting on $100,000 or more in retirement accounts, you need to understand how vulnerable those accounts are to what's coming. I've put together a comprehensive guide on how gold IRAs work, how you can get physical precious metals into your retirement account without tax penalties, how you can protect your nest egg from the currency debasement and market instability we're facing. It's in the description below. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's about understanding your options and making informed decisions about your financial future. The guide covers everything you need to know, and it's worth checking out if protecting your retirement is a priority. Now, back to why silver specifically, and why now. We're at a unique moment in history where multiple crises are converging. You have a debt crisis, with government debt levels that can never be repaid through normal economic growth. You have a currency crisis, with central banks around the world debasing their currencies in a race to the bottom. You have a geopolitical crisis, with the post-World War II order breaking down and new power centers emerging. You have an energy crisis, with the transition to green energy requiring massive amounts of silver and other critical materials. And you have a demographic crisis, with aging populations in developed countries putting unsustainable pressure on pension and healthcare systems. Any one of these crises alone would be enough to drive people toward hard assets like silver. But all of them happening simultaneously? That creates a perfect storm for precious metals. And silver, because of its unique position as both an industrial metal and a monetary metal, because of its tiny market size, because of its historical undervaluation relative to gold, is positioned to be the biggest beneficiary. Let me give you a historical parallel that might help you understand what's possible. In the late 70s, silver went from around $5 an ounce to $50 an ounce in a matter of months. That's a tenfold increase. Now, I'm not predicting that exact scenario will repeat. History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. What I am saying is that silver is capable of explosive moves that dwarf what you see in traditional investments. And the setup today, with all the factors I've described, is arguably more bullish than it was in the 70s. Back then, you had high inflation and geopolitical uncertainty, but you didn't have the industrial demand we have today. You didn't have solar panels and electric vehicles and 5G infrastructure all competing for limited silver supply. You didn't have a derivatives market that's created massive paper claims on physical metal that may not exist. You didn't have a generation of investors who have never experienced a real precious metals bull market and have no idea what's possible when these markets really move. Your 10 ounces of silver is your ticket to participate in what could be one of the greatest wealth transfers in history. Because here's what happens in every major financial crisis. Wealth doesn't disappear, it just changes hands. It moves from those who are unprepared to those who saw it coming. It moves from paper assets to real assets. It moves from the complacent to the prudent. And the beautiful thing about silver is that it's accessible to everyone. You don't need to be wealthy to own 10 ounces. You don't need special connections or insider knowledge. You just need to understand what's happening and take action. Those 10 ounces are your insurance policy, your hedge, your stake in a market that's setting up for a historic move. But here's the critical point. Insurance only works if you have it before you need it. You can't buy fire insurance after your house is burning. You can't buy flood insurance after the waters are rising. And you can't buy silver as a crisis hedge after the crisis has already started. By then, premiums will be through the roof, availability will be scarce, and you'll be competing with millions of other people who suddenly realize they need protection. Right now, you can still acquire silver at reasonable prices. Yes, premiums are elevated compared to a few years ago, but they're nothing compared to what they'll be when real panic sets in. Right now, you can still find it. Dealers have inventory. Mints are producing coins and bars. But that can change quickly. We've seen it before during periods of high demand. Shelves empty. Wait times extend to months. Premiums double or triple. The smart money isn't waiting. Central banks are buying gold at record rates. Wealthy families are allocating more to precious metals. Institutional investors are starting to add exposure. They understand what's coming. They see the same warning signs you're seeing if you're paying attention. The difference is they're acting on it. Your 10 ounces of silver is your action. It's your statement that you understand the risks we're facing. It's your acknowledgement that the financial system we've relied on for decades is showing cracks. It's your preparation for a future that might look very different from the past. And here's something else to consider. Silver is divisible in a way that gold isn't. If you own an ounce of gold worth thousands of dollars, how do you use that in a crisis? How do you make change? But silver, with its lower price per ounce, is practical. You can trade a single ounce for goods or services without the problem of making change. You can scale your transactions to match your needs. That practicality, that usability, adds another layer of value to silver as an insurance policy. Think about the psychology of what we're discussing. Most people have a normalcy bias. They assume that the future will look like the past, that the systems we rely on will continue to function as they always have. But history shows us that this assumption is dangerous. Empires fall, currencies collapse, financial systems break. It's not a matter of if, but when. And the people who survive and thrive through these transitions are the ones who prepared, who diversified, who held real assets. Your 10 ounces of silver is a small price to pay for peace of mind. It's a hedge that costs you very little in the grand scheme of your financial life, but could be worth everything if the scenarios we're discussing play out. And even if they don't, even if somehow the system muddles through and none of the crises I've described materialize, you still own a valuable industrial metal that has thousands of years of history as money. You haven't lost anything. You've simply diversified your wealth into a different form. But let's be honest about the probabilities here. Look at the trajectory we're on. Look at the debt levels, the money printing, the political dysfunction, the geopolitical tensions. Does any of this look sustainable to you? Does it look like we're heading toward stability and prosperity? Or does it look like we're heading toward crisis and upheaval? You don't need to be an economist to see what's coming. You just need to be willing to look. And when that crisis comes, when people are panicking and scrambling to protect their wealth, you'll be calm. You'll be prepared. You'll have your 10 ounces of silver, your insurance policy, your hedge against chaos. You'll have something real, something tangible, something that's been valuable for 5,000 years and will continue to be valuable long after today's paper currencies are forgotten. This is why I'm so passionate about this message, because I see what's coming, and I see how unprepared most people are. I see retirement accounts that are entirely in stocks and bonds, denominated in a currency that's losing purchasing power every day. I see people who have worked their entire lives, who have saved diligently, who have done everything they were told to do, and they're completely exposed to the risks we're facing. They have no hedge, no insurance, no plan B. Don't be that person. Don't be the one who looks back and wishes they had taken action when they had the chance. 10 ounces of silver is not a huge commitment. It's not going to break your budget. But it could be the smartest financial decision you ever make. And here's the final piece of this puzzle. Once you own that silver, once you have it in your possession, you'll understand something that can't be explained, only experienced. You'll understand the difference between wealth that exists as numbers on a screen and wealth that you can hold in your hand. You'll understand why kings and emperors hoarded precious metals. You'll understand why central banks, despite all their talk about gold being a barbarous relic, still hold thousands of tons of it in their vaults. There's a reason silver has been money for millennia. There's a reason it's mentioned in the Bible, in ancient texts, in the historical records of every civilization. It's because silver is real wealth. It's because silver can't be printed, can't be created out of thin air, can't be debased by government decree. It's because silver is the ultimate form of financial independence. Your 10 ounces is your declaration of independence from a system that's failing. It's your vote of no confidence in the monetary experiment we've been living through. It's your insurance policy against the inevitable consequences of decades of financial mismanagement. So, here's what I want you to do. If you've watched this far, if this message resonates with you, take action. Don't just think about it. Don't just agree with the logic and then do nothing. Get your 10 ounces. Start building your insurance policy. And if you're one of those American retirees with 100,000 or more in retirement accounts, check out that guide in the description. Because if you mention you watched this video all the way through, you'll get access to an exclusive one-on-one educational web conference, completely free, no obligation. It's only available to American retirees with at least 100,000 in any retirement account, and it could be the most valuable hour you spend this year. The time to act is now, while you still can, while silver is still available, while the crisis is still on the horizon rather than at your doorstep. Your 10 ounces of silver is waiting. Your insurance policy is waiting. The only question is whether you'll have the wisdom to claim it before it's too late.